and welcome to One on One. My guest today is Peter Georgeson. He's the CEO and founder at Technology Metal Market, a global platform which manages investments on critical metals. Peter, thank you for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, how's your trip around Nigeria been so far?
More than awesome. In fact, it's been fantastic. I've enjoyed the people most importantly. I've enjoyed the communities that we've met. We've been across several states. We visited Nasarawa State and Oyo State and Kwara State and Kogi State and Federal Capital Territory. Today we're in Lagos. So it's been a great pleasure, and I've been amazed, as usual, by everything here. Find the people just to be wonderful. And from the business point of view, tons of potential.
Oh, great. This is your first time in Nigeria?
This is my third time to Nigeria, in the last 3 months, in fact. So I'm
really?
becoming, yes, an adopted son of Nigeria, in fact.
Did you pick up any languages or any slangs along the way?
Well, I learned what an Okada man was a few days ago when we were trekking through Kwara State.
Yeah,
we had to go over a bunch of rivers.
Yeah, I saw that video where you were on the motorbike, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
That's one of the words I picked up.
Okay, nice. So let's get straight to it. So we're talking about the metal market.
Sure.
I find that in a lot of African countries, mining is all that gets done. You know, they take the resources and they take it out of the continent, and then nothing ever gets done. Nothing is refined or built here. Why is that so?
Well, everything, it's an evolution, right? And it takes times not just in the own country, but times in the development of other countries around the world, and the demand that there is to understand that the long game, the development game, is where the real value is. So I think it's now Africa is understanding that in general, Nigeria specifically, that by adding value to your own industries, you're not only bringing a whole dimension of a better industry, more economic power, but there's the social dimension, the social impact, all the different angles, that the skilled labor and many different other facets of building the communities that happens. So why has it not happened? Well, I think it's been an evolution process, right? Where now we're at a time where it's understood here in Africa and Nigeria that this is really what has to happen.
Okay, so I know that the mining industry is a big business, and it really will have a great impact on the African economy. But I want you to tell me the how. How will it grow our GDP as a continent?
Well, again, it comes back to bringing the value back home, right? Today, there is this amazing requirement in the West, call it a need, right, for a lot of the critical core resources that exist across the continent. But if you're just shipping earth, moving the earth around has been happening for centuries, in fact, started hundreds of years ago. You're only really going to take the primary value right off the top. But when you start adding value onto any of the different battery metal verticals, that's when you exponentially gain. So you gain from an economic point of view, there's much more value. You gain from a social point of view, because all of a sudden you have more money in the communities, more skilled labor, communities that are happier. And when you have happier people, well, everything becomes nicer. There's less crime, there's less violence, there's less reason to be angry. And this has been a recurring trend, not just in Africa, but around the world, where you have product being taken out, the spoils being left behind. And in fact, eventually comes a day where people say, what's been left for us? And this is where it really starts changing. The whole country can change from adding value to every single mineral that you process by taking it up the value tree.
Okay, great. So let's talk about skill. Now, for you, you're a businessman, and when I was reading about your profile, like, oh, Peter is not a social capitalist, but he's a venture capitalist. So let's talk about the skills, because like you've said, in centuries, we haven't had the skills in Africa because we have not honed it. Resources have been taken out. Are you going to bring in people to train the locals? How is it going to work to get the skills required?
And that's a natural part of it, right? And then all of a sudden that evolution happens and the skills start developing, right? When everyone starts learning the best techniques. If you don't have a processing industry, then you're never going to learn how to process to a world-class level.
True.
But when you start having that processing industry, all of a sudden the skills naturally develop here. So that's a big part of it, right? And when you have the skills, then you start evolving even further and taking those skills even further. And that's when the community starts benefiting more from higher paid jobs, more investment in the country. And once we set the example, I think other industries will realize the same thing, and this will spread very quickly. And it's not just Nigeria I'm talking about the entirety of Africa.
Yeah. Okay, so you've gone to quite a couple of states across the country. How have you been able to convince the government and get them to win your trust that this is exactly what you want to do? Because, like you said, over the centuries, we've had people come, take out resources and move. But how have you been able to tell them, okay, this is exactly what I want to do, and I need you to believe me that I'm going to stay true to my word or to the contract?
Well, it's not about believing me, right? It's about believing in yourself, in fact. And it's kind of a logical, again, evolution, right? When you take a raw material, it has only a basic core value. But when you take that material a step up and you process it further, it achieves a new value. And all of a sudden, the environmental side of the equation starts coming in, because when you're taking like an ore, any different metal ore, and you're moving it up to a concentrate, you're reducing a tremendous amount of waste. That waste is not being shipped around the world anymore. And then you take that even further up, you're adding even more value to your product. So for me, the way I look at this, it's really just bringing the confidence to understand that today, say here in Nigeria, you have the most chips on the table, you got the best cards, and nobody should be telling you to fold your cards. That's in fact the point. So it's not trust me, I'm the enabler. I'm the one that's helping inspire the awakening that's already there. It exists inside. The power is already here. You got the power. Now it's a question of how to use that for your best benefit. And that's what I'm here to do, right? It's a balanced equation.
Okay.
The point is, if you don't have balance, you can't have a win-win for a long relationship, in any relationship.
True, very true. Okay, let's talk about illegal mining. How do we curb illegal mining? Because for everywhere there's illegal mining, there are illegal miners along the way. So how do we curb this?
I mean, on one hand, it's kind of understandable, right? Because everybody's got a family to feed, right? And when you don't have necessarily opportunities anywhere or everywhere, you got to do something to feed your family. But the fact of the matter is, and we've seen a lot of illegal miners across the country, and I always ask, the people we're with not to be angry with them. Don't give them a hard time. Let them realize the fact that if we do this as an industry, we build an industry, they're going to make a lot more money from legal mining. And that's when a community starts developing further. When you start being able to not just take the earth, ship it out, but actually are able to have concentration plants in a state, and eventually a larger facility that can go to a sulfate or a carbonate in metal terms. It's a more advanced product. Well, then you have every reason to work legally, because the opportunities just widen. You have, in fact, people that will find the way to make their own jobs in these industries. People that'll create their own employment now, because the opportunities will exist legally. And if you can make more money legally, why be illegal, right?
Be illegal? Oh.
And that's the whole point.
All right, now let's talk about child labor. That's a concern for me. How do we ensure that we don't have, because like in Congo, and I don't even like to just use Congo, African countries. I'm sure when you were coming in traffic, you'd have seen some hawkers, on the bridge or on the road, and there are a lot of child hawkers and child laborers. How do we ensure that in this mining process there are not a lot of child laborers, or not at all in the business?
That's a good question, and it has really a two-sided answer here, because a lot of and to be honest, you see it happen, but it's not because they're laboring there. I haven't seen, in fact, laborers really down there. What I've seen is families on a Saturday, mothers often, that have no other place to have their children, right? So they have them on their back and they're working on the mines, or the kids don't have anywhere else to go, so they're there on the mines. But how do you fix that? Number one, it's the easy stuff. You create a reinvestment, right? The social impact side of it. You reinvest in the local community. So you have schools, you have football fields, you have playgrounds, you have teachers that come on a Saturday. In fact, every day over a summer, or any day that's necessary. Then all of a sudden you have a place. And this is reinvestment from the companies that are actually there doing the work. That's step one. But if you take that a step further and think of the monetary side of this, right? When you actually can prove, and everything in the world today, everybody knows everything about everything, right? It's a huge risk for any Western company to have one picture of its mine with children on the site. In fact, you might take years, if ever, restoring your reputation when those types of things happen. But let's flip it around a little bit, right? When your reputation is stellar, when you have a product that is ethically created, where you don't have child labor, you have lovely conditions, you are respecting the environment, you're bringing as much sustainability and durability into your business as possible, now all of a sudden you have a higher value product. The West will pay a premium for an ethical product, right? So ethical lithium, ethical graphite, ethical cobalt, right? Now this has got a premium on it. So there's in fact the most direct incentive ever for the investors here, let's say any local investors in this country to especially do it right, and the international ones, create an ethical product, and you're going to have a higher value. You're going to get a premium for that product. Now I think that's maybe the best incentive. You know, it's absolute game theory, right? Where when you bring the means to the end of a higher product is by doing it right, well then that's where it starts. But this has got to be a top-down approach and a bottom-up. You have to teach the communities that this is better, this is going to bring more by doing it right. And from the top, it's got to be, you kind of got to buy into that, to this philosophy. But I see it happening all over the world today. Most people are making this buy-in. They've realized that it's the right thing to do, but it's also from an economic standpoint, it brings a higher value product, and that's a huge win. So doing things right is a win for everybody, in fact.
Okay, I totally agree with you. Okay, let's take a short break. We'll take a short break and then we'll be right back. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us on One-on-One. I still have Peter Jurgensen with me here in the studio. Okay, thank you. Interesting conversation so far. So let's talk about the mined minerals. What's the word now? What role do they play in the global energy market, especially because they are still solid fossils?
Well, they play a massive role, okay. and this is in fact the whole dynamic which is creating this great opportunity. You have an entire world shifting to electric vehicles, for example, and lesser use of hydrocarbons. And when you look at electric vehicles and electric vehicle and battery technologies, you have a multitude of various different minerals which are going into that. You mentioned cobalt earlier. Yeah. We've talked about lithium. We've talked about graphite. Graphite is the key, what's called anode material, okay, which goes into batteries. You have manganese, you have the rare earths, and it's not just the EV industry. You have so many different end-use industries within this energy revolution that are requiring these minerals. And as has often been the case in history, Africa is very blessed, geologically speaking. Nigeria, in fact, specifically, some of the mineralizations here in Nigeria are amongst the best in the world. No. So this is even more the reason to harness those and develop those yourselves. And this is what's really the leading factors here. It's this incredible global need for these metals. And there is, in fact, an insatiable need. And I can assure you of this, the demand is probably at an exponential of 10 times more than the supply available around the world. And not just now, it's going to get worse and worse over the next 10, 15 years, until potentially supply picks up, new technologies are brought in, science and evolution bring better usage, better efficiencies. But we're looking at a situation where supply is far less than the demand for the next 15 years.
Okay, so let's talk about the local communities where these minerals are found. What role should they play towards this development? How do they begin to, should I say, harness their power, what they need to know? Because oftentimes they're used to people coming in, throwing in a bit of money and then promises. But, you know, like you said, there's a reawakening now, but it's on a rural level. They're not like, they're not like me or you and I. So what roles will the communities play towards this development, the local communities?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think the local communities, they often are the ones that pay the biggest price, right, when things are done wrongly. And I've met a lot of, you could say, local leaders from these local communities. And I've felt nothing but embracing, right, what I've said, because I think by now, in the world today, we're also interconnected, right? I think there's no difference between the villager out in the mine that has very little, right? He still has a cell phone, and he has an acute awareness of himself, and he wants the same rights, the same opportunities that anybody else, not just in Africa, in the whole world has. And this is a key part of what I've been developing and working on for the last 4 or 5 years, which is democratization, transparency, and empowerment, to be able to create a market where everyone can connect together on a very open and transparent level is key. So I would say, first of all, the people in the local communities are acutely aware. So they're not as naive as we would think. Okay. And when you start thinking about logic, it becomes so logical, as we said in the very beginning, your first question, which is, it's the confidence, it's just giving the confidence to understand that you're right. You're right. It is how it should be. In fact, you should be developing more value in your community by not just letting the earth be shipped out, but in fact by saying, hey, we've got the value here, but if you want it, you need to add some more value to what we do here. You need to make the investments that create the social impact, that leave a good legacy behind, that don't leave us with environmental waste, that don't leave us with angry people, right? The investments that create more value for the community and that leave positive things behind. So I'd say very much so the local communities, they already understand this. They just need to find more and more of the right partners. So I'd hope that we're paving the way, in fact, setting an example for other companies to follow. And I believe there are many more of those companies that will follow. Sometimes you just need a few pioneers that are going to break the ground and tell people what they really already know deep in their hearts.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up, my last question to you is, you've talked a lot about the communities and us in Africa, but I want to ask you, Peter, what is in it for you?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's balance, right? You can't have a durable, long-standing relationship without balance. And I can't expect to take or expect to be given or want the opposite without balance, right? So obviously, from a business perspective, I'm here to build a business. I have a family, right? And just like every local villager that wants wants a fair deal, he wants balance and he wants to be able to take care of his family. So that's part of it. But what's in it for me is, I suppose as well, the satisfaction of building something strong, durable, being a part of that. That's a good feeling. It's a good feeling to be able to harness all this change and transformation and be at the forefront of it. So it's a mix of winning on an economic side, a mix of doing something that feels good, leaving something good behind, having people think good things about you because you've truly made change in their life. It's a winning formula, you know. It's not just, it's a package, right? It's a balance. So it's a balance between, as we just talked, between any contractual relationship needs to have balance to survive for the long term. But my involvement here, it's balanced across other people winning and me winning too.
Okay, fantastic. And I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you so much, Funmi. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
It's also been a pleasure. Thank you so much. That's been a very interesting conversation about the metal market with Peter. So join me again next week. My name is Funmi Unwajefe, and that's all we can take on one-on-one for today's episode.